For the purpose of the Committee of the Whole, it is 8:24. Clerk Spencer, I'd ask you please call the roll.
Gutenkopf.
Here.
Loiter.
Here.
Dunn.
Here.
Leader.
Here.
Palumski.
Here.
Graham.
Here.
Hipskin. Absent. York. Absent. Levin.
Here.
Healy.
Here.
Conquest.
Here.
Kennedy.
Here.
Mulliner.
Here. Les.
Mulliner.
Here.
Wagner. Absent. 11 present, 3 absent. Do you want to do?
Yeah, 11 present, 3 absent. I forgot the pledge. We have a quorum. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, before we, we'll get over that. Before we get to our public comments, I'm going to do something a little out of the ordinary this evening. I'm going to ask in just a minute that you all join me in a moment of silence for Gabriella Miller. Gabriella Miller is a young lady, 10 years old, who lost her battle with brain cancer a day and a half ago. Gabriella is near and dear to many people in Elmhurst's hearts. She has 2 uncles, 2 aunts, and several nieces and nephews who have been pulling for Gabriella. And the best thing I can say is she's a true hero. I would encourage all of you, media included, to go to smashingwalnuts.org, smashingwalnuts.org. Gabriella Miller did more in the last year of her life than almost anybody I know. And she's a true hero, and I know that she's a family member of Elmhurst, and I know her family is suffering right now, and I just want to give her a few moments of silence in remembrance of her and show our support for her family. Thank you. Okay, very good. Thanks for your indulgence on that one. Clerk Spencer, do we have any public comments this evening? Anybody
Mr.
signed
Mayor,
up for public
no
comments?
one signed in for public comment.
No one signed in for public comments. That might be a first for me. Although no one did sign up, is there anybody in the audience who did not have an opportunity to sign up on our spreadsheet, or anybody who would wish to address the council this evening? Seeing none, we'll move on to, I think we got a Scribner's error on our Committee of the Whole agenda in terms of the numbering. But we will go to agenda item, it's labeled for, it's number 3, business before the committee, a review of our fiscal budget. As the council will recall, we got a bit of a late start during our last meeting and didn't get very far, but we've got some more time tonight, at least an hour and a half. I would like to try to keep it to 10 o'clock. That's my goal throughout this process. So without any further ado, I'll turn it over to City Manager Grabowski to kick us off.
Thank you. As everyone will recall, and as the Mayor stated, the last meeting we ended with the Historical Museum. We'd like to begin tonight with the library. Move through. If we can get through police tonight, that would be great. But we understand the time constraints, and we'll move accordingly. So with that, I would invite the representatives from the library up and turn it to them.
Good evening. Can you hear me? Am I close enough? Okay. It's a pleasure to meet with you this evening to review the library's budget. I'm Linda Wheaton, President of the Elmhurst Library Board of Trustees. I would like to begin by introducing other trustees who are here this evening, Bill Shanklin and Sue Sadowski. Mary Beth Campy is also beside me here.
Could you, Mayor, if you could use the microphone a little closer? Thank you.
The library celebrated its 10-year anniversary in its new building on October 4th, 2013. People who had been instrumental in getting the referendum passed to build the new library attended a reception on that afternoon. Many residents enjoyed behind-the-scene tours of their library. All in all, it was a great day, and when we heard over and over again how much the residents of Elmhurst loved their library, we certainly enjoyed their comments. As the board president, I am happy to report that usage statistics continue to increase each year. Even after 10 years, the library still seems fresh and exciting. Library staff and the Board of Trustees are dedicated to making sure that the Elmhurst Library remains not only relevant to its community, but essential. It is with this goal in mind that we made decisions about budget and policy. We always listen to our community, assessing needs and striving to bring patrons not only what they are asking for, but also what they don't even know they want yet. Currently, the outdated audio-visual equipment in the meeting rooms is being replaced to improve patron service. Our community will now have meeting rooms that are equipped with state-of-the-art technology. The advanced capability of such things as high-resolution video conferencing, interactive whiteboards, and high-fidelity sound equipment will allow residents and local businesses to communicate with others more efficiently. This new technology has endless possibilities for connecting, creating, teaching, and viewing. Libraries all around us are changing, and so are we. Patron usage trends are telling us that we need more study rooms, more digital media material, more creative and technology-related programming. Our fiscal year 2014 budget reflects this changing environment, with money budgeted for scheduled upgrades and a space reorganization. People are asking, and we are planning to deliver. With more study rooms, improved computers, a separate teen area, and enhanced display of materials, we will be better able to serve our patrons. Also, with this reorganization, patrons will be able to create their own high-quality audio and video productions in media labs designed exclusively for Elmhurst residents. Other area libraries are already providing this and are seeing their patrons served in ways that couldn't have been imagined 10 years ago. We are also dedicated to continuing to serve the community's needs by making sure that our print, audio, and visual collections are abundant. Elmhurst is a unique community where residents continue to check out items for education, entertainment, and cultural purposes in record numbers. Before you tonight, you have our budget, which includes not only our operating expenses, but also the funds needed for repayment of our building bonds. Our levy, which you approved last March, includes a 1% increase. Over the past 4 years, library levy increases have remained very conservative. We have shifted money between budget lines to ensure that money is being spent where we need it. We have never, nor will we ever, operate on the premise that things will remain the same. What was needed several years ago may not be needed today, and something else may take its place. Our changing budget lines reflect the fiscal responsibility of assessing our budget each year and making sure that we are not always adding on. Some lines are increasing, some lines are decreasing, and other lines are not being funded. New lines are being created to reflect the changing environment. Because of this, we've been able to increase our levy only slightly for the past several years. As you know, almost all of our operating revenue is realized from property taxes. A very small amount of funding comes from fines and fees. The fines that we collect are for items that aren't returned on time and are meant to be a deterrent, not a revenue stream. Patrons are rarely charged for anything at the library beyond what they have already paid in property taxes. We have the role of managing their tax dollars very seriously. We look at usage rates to determine how successful we are in spending those dollars. With 1.5 million items circulating a year and over 480,000 visits, we operate very effectively and efficiently. We are very proud of the fact that the Elmhurst Library circulates more per capita than almost every other library in the state of Illinois. Thank you for helping us to make the library such a successful resource for the community. On behalf of the board, I would like to thank the mayor and the city council, as well as the city manager and the rest of the city staff who help us on a daily basis. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wheaton. Mary Beth, any setup or
Pardon?
ready to take questions?
I am ready.
Any questions for Ms. Camp regarding the library budget? Alderman Gutenkopf.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Last year, we heard about your plan changes for the automated system for checking books in and out. Could you give us a little update on how that's working?
The automated system for checking items in and out, or the card catalog?
It was the checking books in, as I recall, it had to do with returning books and how
Sure.
that was changing.
The sorter. We did that actually, it was a year ago last May. So we had to redo our RFID system. RFID is radio frequency identification, and every item in the library has a tag in it. And that actually allows us to check items in and out, and it tracks it on your card. Our system was actually an antiquated system. It was put in when the library was built, and it needed to be replaced because the company that created it, Checkpoint, was no longer in business. So we actually replaced our system with a 3M system, and we also added a sorter to our system. The sorter is in the back of the circulation area where you check your books in and out, and if you haven't seen it, there is a window where you can go and view it. If you'd actually like a behind-the-scenes tour, I can give you one. But what that does is when you return your books in the little slots, they go right in, they check in, and they're automatically sorted into separate bins. That's been up and running now for over a year, and it has proved to be very efficient. We are seeing items back on the shelves much more quickly than we were before. Staff used to be double checking everything in. Items would come in, and even though they checked in, we still had to check them in again in order to capture all the holds for people or in order to find items that were going to other libraries. So now there's none of that. If you can imagine, all the staff members on the circulation desk were actually checking in every single item that was already checked in again, and that's 1.5 million items a year. So that task is no longer being done. The items go right into bins, put on directly onto carts, and are brought upstairs. One of the biggest efficiencies we've realized too is on a day when we have a situation where we've lost power, or a situation we had this summer where we had some bad storms and the library was closed. We're seeing those items back on the shelf by noon the next day that we're opened. I think it was 2 summers ago that we had that power outage for 3 days and we're closed. And that would have been a nightmare. All those items would have been still being returned, and the place would have been full, and all those items had to be checked in manually and put back on shelves. It might have taken us a week to catch up with that. Now we can catch up by noon the next day. So really, we've really realized some efficiencies with this order. So it's going great.
Additional questions or comments? Alderman Gutenkopf.
Well, as long as you mentioned the card catalog system, you're switching from Swan to a different system. So how is that working, and how is that changing the amount of books that are out in circulation, not in Elmhurst?
Well, what's interesting with that is we actually did just switch. We switched over from a consortial situation where we were in a consortium with about 88 other libraries. Now we are considered what we call a standalone library, where we have our own card catalog, and we have a partnership with, I think it's now 6 or 7 other libraries that we can get books from. But in order to get books from other libraries, and in order for people to get books from our library, they actually have to take a little extra step and kind of consciously make a decision to choose to go outside of their own card catalog and look in one of these other card catalogs to get their item. We had been sending out, when we were in the consortium, 98,000 items a year to other libraries. We'd been bringing in about 70,000 items a year. However, we don't know how many of those 70,000 items were items that we actually might have had on our shelves, but were at other libraries, because there was no mechanism that said, oh, you own that book, your patron will just wait for that book. So you could have been choosing a book, and we might have owned it, yet you were getting it from Blue Island, and it was being driven up here by a huge system of trucks and things. So anyway, so now the last 2 months, we've only been on the system for 2 months. We sent out 1,000 items and brought in 900 or something like that, or brought in 1,000, sent out 900. Greatly reduced from what we were before. If that keeps up, we'll be at about 12,000 items a year going out and about the same coming in. That has definitely will increase our efficiency, and hopefully more of our items will be on shelf for our patrons to check out. The first month of statistics that we were a standalone, it was really very interesting, and I'm not exactly sure what it's attributed to, but our circulation statistics were up 17% that month. Now, when we see a 1% increase in circulation from the month we're comparing it to a year before, we're excited about that, or a 2%. So I'm not sure where the 17% comes from. That's a huge number. Either more of our stuff was on shelf that our patrons were actually coming in and getting it, or there was some glitch in the statistical reporting that we were from the consortium we were in, which is actually a real big deal to us because we rely on those statistics so heavily for budgeting, for the different awards we get, to see how efficient we are, to see how well we're doing compared to other libraries. So it is a big deal. It's kind of, I always equate it to our profit margin. You know, we've got high circulation, we're doing really well. So far so good. We certainly have had some patrons who didn't like the move from Swan, I'm going to be honest with you. I think they'll get used to it though, and I think that they'll find that they can get everything that they need from us.
Any other questions? Alderman Bram.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple questions on page, and I don't know if you even need to look it up, but on page 179, full-time employees, and my other question would be about video cassettes and DVDs.
Yep.
Full-time employees for 2014 projected is 1.75 million. Relative to other years, it seems to be a significant increase. With all the automation that has been implemented at the library, have we seen an increase in number of employees, or what's the at least reason that I'm seeing a perceived increase?
We did add 2 full-time positions, 2 full-time IT positions. However, that money for those positions was moved from, if you go down to our contractual services line down below, or section, and you look under professional services there, and you see that in 2011, 12, and 12, 13, we were at about $100,000 in that line. Now that line is at $41,000. So we took money from that line. We were outsourcing all of our IT, and it was about $100,000 a year in outsourcing. So we took that money, we put it into our salary line, or not all of it, but a lot of it, and we actually hired 2 in-house IT people. It's worked out beautifully. We're extremely happy with it, with all the changes we've been making so far with the catalog, with the RFID. We're actually redoing the audiovisual equipment in our meeting rooms right now. We would have really been hard-pressed to do these jobs as well as we did without in-house IT. So very, very beneficial to both staff and patrons to have an in-house IT. So that's part of that, for sure.
And then the other item being video cassettes, which I don't know if kids these days even know what that is, and DVDs. It looks like there's nothing budgeted this year. Is that because things are online and there's nothing at the library, or just the library's not servicing that anymore?
Nope, we definitely are servicing that, and there's actually an error here. If you look up under commodities in 4008, that line has been changed this year to AV materials. And the reason that is so high at $172,000 is because...
Sorry, Mary Beth, where was that?
Up there on 40... Oh, I'm sorry. I gotta put my glasses on. Excuse me. On 4003 there on the top, that should say AV materials. Okay. And if you look under the 2014 budget year, we budgeted $172,000 for that. We switched that line from what used to be audio, it wasn't even cassettes, I think it was audio books or something, to include all AV. So in that line now, in that $172,000 line, you have all those other lines that we're not funding anymore. And the reason we did that is because it just makes it much easier for us in budgeting. If we've underspent, if we're nearing the end of our budget year and we've underspent our DVD line and we need more audio books, sometimes it can happen because of publishing or the way movies come out. It allows us more flexibility with spending that money. Before, it was totally tied into DVDs. You had a budgeted amount there. So this is just a larger, it's like books. You know, we break out our books into separate categories that our selectors choose from, but that money can be moved around more freely under that overhead. So that's why we did that.
Thank you.
So we'll get that corrected.
Okay. Alderman Dunn.
On page 175, where you show your fund balance at the bottom.
Yes.
I see back in the last full year, 2013, we had a fund balance of about 1.6 million, 1.7 million. That's double this year, the end of this year. It looks like it's about 6 months of operating expenses, so that's pretty healthy fund balance. The city's guidance, our targets are 3 to 4 months, so
Right.
maybe, is that just a temporary? I see that carrying over into next year also.
Right.
Why such a high fund balance?
Well, that's because of the way that our budget year is going to fall now. We're in an 8-month budget cycle, so we actually budgeted for 8 months this year. We are going to be carrying a fund balance over, and we'll be using that money to bridge that gap because most of our money, or almost all of it, comes in the summertime. We'll have to bridge a gap here between December or January and May, late May, early June, when our first payment comes in. So we will be carrying a higher balance in that fund. I'm sorry, there was another part of your question that, as far as the 3 to 4 months, definitely I know the city carries about 3 to 4 months, and in our area, it's usually more common to carry almost 6 months of operating fund in the general fund because we are so reliant on property taxes. So we don't really have any other revenue streams. We have the small revenue stream of fines and fees, as I talked about during our speech, or as Linda said, but that's really not significant. It's about $90,000 a year is what we budget for that.
So is it a little bit of a timing issue, is what
Yes.
you're saying?
Definitely a timing issue.
At the end of the year, the balance is higher, and then
Right.
it drifts down.
And it's gonna, yeah.
Okay. Any additional questions from Ms. Camp? I think you've answered them all.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Grabowski, IT?
Yes, we will be moving on to IT now, and I believe Mike Kopp will be presenting that along with Mike Stenson.
Okay.
The IT department continues to manage the city's computer, data, and voice technologies, provides maintenance and repair services to all city departments and employees. In 2013, the IT department processed 7 million emails, recycled 2,781 pounds of electronics, recycled 39 ink and toner cartridges, and 120 copier toner cartridges. As you may recall, based on the NIU Center for Governmental Studies evaluation of the IT department, the organization of the IT department was restructured. Currently, all full-time and part-time positions are full, and we're working on recruiting for the 2 intern positions, one in the area of GIS and one in the general IT support. The IT department in the last year was involved in the upgrading of data facilities in the Public Works Garage and the wastewater treatment plant. The Public Works Garage was for the Chevron fleet maintenance system. Chevron is replacing the current CFA fleet maintenance software and with a web-based system. The new system will allow interface for the Park District, for the police, and for the fire department work request management system. And the wastewater treatment plant, the new maintenance management system, the CMMS Lucidity, is being installed to better communicate with all wastewater treatment facilities. This is a wireless communication system from the treatment plant to all its facilities, the lift stations, water production. And once it's up and operating, we will allow other wireless access to the network for city operations. Maybe For inspectors, could be using the system, bring a iPad or something out in the field to be able to access the material, or even if we can place cameras throughout the city and have that video feed come back to the police station or city hall, wherever it is we might need it. The IT department continues to evaluate the cost of establishing a wide area fiber network. Upgrading our wide area network to provide a larger bandwidth is becoming essential. With the large amounts of data and video being transported over the network, the current bandwidth is quickly becoming obsolete. I'd like to draw your attention to the capital outlay, line items 8003 and 8031 for the proposed 2014 budget. The significant dollars in this budget, about $650,000, are for the evaluation and possible implementation of the city's enterprise resource planning system, or commonly called the ERP. Currently, we use the HD SunGuard software. An important aspect of the NIU study, when it was done, was the evaluation of our current system and its effectiveness for today's organization. Over the next 12 months, we'll be evaluating the current system along with possible alternatives, including an upgrade to the current ERP system. Also, under capital, line item 8098, $245,000. This breaks down to basically two major projects. One is $100,000 for the implementation of a new phone system in City Hall, and $100,000 to investigate the possibility of an electronic sign at the Robert Palmer Drive underpass. Lastly, I want to bring to your attention that the total IT budget, once it's established, all IT service and expenditures are allocated as interdepartmental charges to all other departments. You can find on page 358 of the budget book the breakdown of these charges to all other departments. The allocation, when it's broke down, is based on the number of computers assigned to that area. Also, as we move through the budget document, you'll see those charges for each department in line item 9501 of each department's budget. And I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Mr. Kopp, that last statement about the IT allocation, what page was that on?
358.
358, okay. Okay.
The top of 358 shows a central garage breakdown, how that's broken down, and then the bottom half is how the IT is broken down. Those are both interdepartmental charges to all departments.
Okay.
And the IT one is broken down by the number of computers assigned to that area.
Okay, 358, thank you. Any questions for Assistant City Manager Kopp? Alderman Levin.
And the 8098, part of that is the electronic sign for Palmer Drive. We've been talking about that for a couple of years. Is there some impediment to moving forward? Is there a zoning issue, or is there a budget issue that is in advance of that project?
Well, at this point, we're sort of in a holding pattern based on what will happen with the electronic sign ordinance.
Thank you.
Alderman Healy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Follow up. What is that zone? What is the Palmer Drive zone? Is that it's probably not R2.
It's a C4.
C4? So I would think that any concern about zoning wouldn't be appropriate there, because what's before those DPZ now is all residential based, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, the electric sign ordinance is actually being looked at both in the commercial and the residential. Back when this first came up, the commercial district side of it was sort of kicked to the EDC. There's a ad hoc committee for the EDC to look at signage, looking at more than just electronic sign, but the DPC committee was staying tasked with the residential portion of it, and EDC, along with staff, was working on the commercial side of it, and that will be going forward to the Zoning and Planning Commission also.
Thank you.
Alderman Honquist, did you have your hand up? Any other IT questions for Assistant City Manager Kopp? Only going to ask once. Okay, let's move on. Fire protection. Thanks, Mr. Kopp.
Thank you. With that, I'll ask Chief Bassiter to come up and join me and explain the budget.
Good evening. The Elmhurst Fire Department continues to provide protection of life and property in the Elmhurst community. The continued commitment by you, the City Council, allows us to continually provide responsive and superior public safety services which the Elmhurst community has come to expect. In 2013, we will have responded to approximately 6,400 fire and EMS calls for service with an average response time of 4 minutes and 36 seconds. To accomplish our mission, we continue to put a great emphasis on training in order to keep our personnel prepared for any type of incident that presents itself. We continue to utilize our training facility, but in 2013, we had a unique opportunity to train at the old Elmhurst Hospital building. Occupancies of this type give our firefighters a more real-life experience when conducting training. Also, over the past year and a half, we've been working more closely with other area fire departments on a cooperative effort as it relates to training, dispatch procedure, and purchasing of equipment. Again, this year, we are proposing to replace some equipment that has been continually breaking down and can no longer be repaired. This equipment includes rescue saws, gas monitors to use to test the homes for natural gas leaks, exhaust fans, dewatering pumps, and fire hose. We will work with other fire departments to see if cooperative purchasing power may save us some money when replacing this equipment. The other highlight are funds in the 2014 proposed line item for a second DUCOM facility. In the past 5 years, 12 new agencies have joined DUCOM. This consolidation is good for Elmhurst as it spreads the overall dispatch costs over many more agencies and has provided for many more on-duty dispatchers. For consolidation to continue, more space for dispatchers has to be provided. During the past year, DUCOM has been meeting with representatives from the College of DuPage about the possibility of the second DUCOM facility being part of this College of DuPage's Phase 2 plan for their Homeland Security Center. If DUCOM's second facility were able to be part of this Phase 2 plan, then funds from local, state, and federal grant programs might be available. I thank you for enhancing the life of those who live and work and visit Elmhurst by supporting the fire department and its mission. I would also like to thank the dedicated firefighter and paramedics who hold devotion to duty above their personal safety and comfort while helping those in need in the community. I'd be glad to try to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Any questions for Chief Bassador? Alderman Levin.
As a former member of the Finance Committee, I'm embarrassed to ask this question, but I couldn't find it elsewhere. Lines 2011 and 2012, I couldn't quite remember how this tied in to the employer contribution. Is this pension funding or?
No, I'll let you.
This is, yes, this is the actuarially determined amount that the city should contribute to the pension fund. So this is shown as an expense in the fire department. We'll see it on the revenue side as the revenue for the tax levy. It would match. So the bottom line impact on the general fund is zero, but it'll be shown as a revenue coming in through the tax levy and an expense going out of the fire department into the pension fund.
All right, and then the follow-up is, it seems like, over, 2014 over the 8-month 2013 budget, there's almost looks like almost a decrease in wages slightly or about the same, but the pension contribution is going up by, 45%.
Yes, I'm sorry, going to the 1,745,000.
Right.
That's attributable to two factors, changes in our actuarial assumptions that the Finance Committee just completed that review. One is changing from a 1971 actuarial table, mortality table, to a 2000 mortality table. Right there, it created a 10% increase, and then an additional increase because of an adjustment for the investment returns, reducing the investment return assumption from 7.25% to 7%. Those two factors together contributed significantly to a one-time increase in that pension amount.
And have we had any, are we in such shape that we've not had to do any catch-up to get within the requirements that maybe other municipalities? Or I guess we're all in the same
We're pretty much
program.
all in the same boat, but we are we are every year contributing exactly what actuarially we should to keep up with the current costs of funding, along with paying towards the unfunded liability that is out there.
All right, and the last question is, could you talk a little bit about where we are in the unfunded liability and how that compares, what our plan is on that?
For fire, we're probably about 70% funded. And that's very normal. If you look at other municipalities, we're probably actually a little bit better. We've been impacted, the funds have been impacted significantly because of the economic downturn, and the investment returns have really caused that number to go down in the last 3 years.
All right, thank you very much. I'm speaking directly into the microphone as the instruction sheet says.
Following the sign, that's good. Alderman Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Jeff, on 9503 Central Garage Services, we're seeing a pretty big increase comparing 12-13 to 14 from, say, 243,000 to 294,000. But if you go to page 358, maybe this is just a question that everybody will ask eventually. The central equipment maintenance, looks like we're making a pretty significant change from, say, 1.7 million to 2.3 million. Can you talk about specifically what's going on in the fire department, and then overall why such a major change there?
Yeah, I can tell you that some of our bigger apparatus are getting older. For instance, our oldest ladder truck has got 95,000 miles on it. And anything with that kind of mileage, it's requiring more and more maintenance. In future years here, we will be talking about what we're going to do as far as we're looking at the replacement of that. But higher mileage is just causing more repairs.
And Marilyn, do you want to address the whole subject while we're on it?
I know when we get to Public Works, we'll go into more detail. The budget for the central equipment maintenance is on page 156. The comparison of the 2.3 million to about 1.7, again, we're comparing an 8-month year to a 12-month year. Probably a more fair comparison is looking back 2 years ago when that budget was about 2 million. For the 2013 12-month fiscal year. The increases, is mostly in capital. Right, about 180,000 is capital of what I will say is about a $340,000 increase. Looking at fiscal 12-13 to the projected 2014. So there's capital outlay for vehicles and for some other equipment that's needed for that department to operate. The way this budget is allocated out to the departments is based on the request for service. So what Chief Bassador is saying is correct. If his equipment over the last year required more service, he's getting a bigger piece of this particular pie right now.
All right, thank you.
Alderman Dunn.
Just a follow-up to Alderman Levin's discussion on the pension. With Marilyn, you mentioned the two assumptions that drove the increase, and one of them was the rate of return, and I think we were at a 7.25% rate of return, and we initially looked at lowering that to 6.75. I think your budget number probably reflects that. I know it nets out to zero, but is it appropriate to take that down to more properly reflect what we would expect to pay based on those new assumptions? It's probably going to be like $150,000 reduction.
Yes, we can definitely make that change because the budget should reflect what the council has approved. As far as the bottom line, it doesn't matter because that number will change both in the revenue side and on the expense side. But we should have the right number in for the budget. So for the final budget document, we will be changing that number.
And that would be the same for the police budget also.
Marilyn, can we note that on whether you call it the circle backlist or whatever it is, just so that we take a look at it when we get the final version? Thank you. Additional questions for Chief Bassador?
Does anybody have any questions on the wireless or the ESDA as well?
On the wireless.
Alderman Healy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I do have a question. So if I'm reading it correctly, we're budgeting approximately $265,000 in revenue for the wireless next year and expenditures of approximately $167,000. About where does that $100,000 excess go? Does it just go to fund balance, or do we have that earmarked somewhere else? Just fund balance. Fund balance? Thank you.
Any additional questions?
Thank you,
Alderman
Mr. Mayor.
Kennedy.
One quick question about the civil defense budget. What portion, I see we have part-time wages there. Is that a percentage of one person's time?
As our coordinator, Don Novak, is a part-time position, and it's actually, we do get some grant money back from the state of Illinois that does reimburse us for some of the costs that go along with his position.
Okay. Thank you, Chief. Thanks for all your hard work.
You.
City Manager Grabowski.
Thank you. Next, we're going to get into Public Works, and Interim Director Weinstock will come up along with some help from the department. Steve has been doing a good job in getting up to speed as to what our budget says and how it reads and the particulars of it. But I know that Pat Morley's here, Corey Taberry is here, and also Gary Smith. So they will be answering questions as appropriate. And with that, I would turn it over to Steve.
Thank you. Budget highlights for the general fund of the Public Works Department. In engineering, they completed 9 miles of contract paving in 2013. This included residential street resurfacing and street resurfacing improvements in the south part of the central business district. Completed federally funded roadway improvements to St. Charles Road from York High School to Illinois Route 83. We had 70% federal funding on that for a $504,000 construction cost project. We will be completing the federally funded Butterfield Road at Commonwealth Lane intersection improvements. These are providing dual left turns for northbound Commonwealth to westbound Butterfield, a new eastbound right turn lane from eastbound Butterfield to southbound Commonwealth, and new traffic signals to accommodate the additional lanes. Our 70% federal funding was $1.3 million of the total $1.9 million construction cost. For 2014, we'll be continuing the annual contract paving project, $1.75 million in asphalt contract paving, $300,000 in concrete paving, repaving, additional $400,000 from the TIF account for the Central Business District paving program. This would be areas south of the railroad tracks in the Central Business District. And then totaling 9 miles of paving. Staff is applying for the Illinois Green Infrastructure Grant for funding a City Hall porous paver parking lot project. These applications are due this December, and if the grant dollars are not awarded, the Capital Improvement Fund includes $65,000 to resurface the City Hall parking lot next year. We're looking forward to the new budget cycle and adjusting project schedules to take advantage of the additional time that allows to prepare plans and bid projects in the early winter, and early spring to fully use the summer months for constructions. Operationally, in the last year, we planted 578 new trees. We replaced the fleet maintenance and management software system with a new web-based system to track utilization, operating costs, repair productivity, accident costs, warranty, replacement cycles, and storeroom inventory usage, all for the central garage. Supported 180 block parties and over 30 special events, including the St. Patrick's Day, Pet, and Memorial Day parades, Cool Cars, the Annie Ryan Run, J.C.'s Carnival, 4 on the 4th Run, Bike Race, and the Turkey Trot. We collected and recycled over 1,500 pounds of holiday lights from the Elmhurst community, which was up from 500 pounds the prior year. We'll be continuing splitting the various operations costs with city employees and contractors for street sweeping, tree trimming, and tree removals. At the Public Works Garage, we hosted the annual community food drive. That'll be held on December 14th this year, and hosted 4 Northern Illinois mobile food pantry events. All of these items that I mentioned will be continuing in the next fiscal year. We have scheduled for replacement or installing a new emergency generator for the City Hall and the Public Works Department. And we have a study in this upcoming year for street lighting, engineering study to study the circuits and the luminaires that are used in the city, as well as a funding for a major study of the storm sewers of the larger sizes, 36 inches and larger, to clean and inspect all of those sewers and determine what repairs need to be made. We feel that's important, very important, to continue the best we can do on the flood prevention. And with that, we're open for questions.
Well, thank you, Mr. Weinstock. Questions for our Public Works Group? Alderman Bram.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 2 what I would deem to be significant questions, and maybe it's more commentary than questions. The 2 items go tied to the capital budget for Public Works, I believe, one of which is on page 145 under capital outlay, and that's 80-15, roadway improvements. My understanding of roadway improvements here encompasses multi-line, sublines, if you will, of work, being asphalt reconstruction as well as concrete reconstruction. Really, the commentary is I don't think that there's the appropriate funding in this line item, and I would like to request this as a circle back. I don't know if we request this line item under capital outlay, so I'll look for the city staff guidance on that. But I think that the rehabilitation of the concrete streets within the city of Elmhurst needs to be seriously looked at and increased, and I would like to make that as a circle back. And the other item I would like to comment on, again, I guess probably more commentary than questions, would be on page 157 under capital outlay once again, and I believe it's listed under street improvements, and that's 80-25 again on page 157. I'd like to request this as a circle back item. This is something we discussed last year in relatively great detail. This is the proposed York Prairie Path underpass. I don't want to dive too much into detail here, but the request last year was to have a review from last year's budget cycle, prior to this year's budget cycle, to see if there's the appropriate justification or what the full city council deems appropriate for this request. That has not happened to date, so I would like to make that as a circle back item so we can discuss that further as well.
Okay. Alderman Mulliner.
I support that request on the underpass. I think that we need to make sure that we circle back to that one and have a discussion about that.
Any additional comments or questions regarding Public Works? Alderman Palomsky.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To facilitate that discussion, can I ask staff to please provide some information on, do we have any statistics for crime on our existing underpasses? Please, thank you.
Question, I missed that.
Any other, Alderman Deuter.
Thank you, Mayor. Could I just get a little more information about the proposed new program for sewer storm cleaning? Just what will be targeted in a particular area? You're hoping to take a closer look at all the city sewers?
We're proposing about 23 miles of sewers to be the largest sewers in the city. It would be from size 36 inches in diameter and larger, all the way up. We've got sewers that are just over 6 feet in diameter. And these are the storm sewers that obviously take the water to Salt Creek for the most part. And we had one failure, a substantial failure this year after the April storm. And that sewer is made out of segmental blocks to create a circle, almost like bricks. And after seeing that, we thought that it would be a good idea to go through all the larger sewers and look for failures, just to ensure the integrity of the system, during the storm events.
And is there thank you for that explanation. Is there can I ask another question?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Is there some portion of an existing program that does the same type of thing for the smaller pipes?
Well, yes, a lot of the smaller sewers are handled by our city staff, and they have a program for going through those. But the larger sewers is another matter. And actually, we're probably looking at about 40% of that money being involved in the cleaning and televising, and the remainder of the funding would be available for repairs, so we could get it all in 1 year.
Thank you.
Alderman Healy, and I'll go to Alderman Gutenkopf.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In conjunction with Alderman Palomsky's request, I'd like to make sure we get that information for all 5 pedestrian underpasses already in town, please.
Alderman Gutenkopf.
I know we're going to circle back and talk about the underpass. I just have a question about why the capital expenditure budget for that line is proposing $150,000 being spent in the 2014 fiscal year, but on page 157, there's only $125,000 there.
First off, that money is for a Phase 1 engineering study. That would enable us to apply for other grant funds from the CMAQ project. And I believe, as Director Gaston tells me, that was discussed, I think, at Public Works, and it was determined to bring that down after the capital budget was discussed, to bring that down to 125.
Thank you.
So we can correct the capital budget to reflect that.
Additional questions or comments? Alderman Dunn.
Yes, also on page 157, under the sidewalk improvement line item, we had a project budgeted for this year, and initially that was delayed because of some communication issues between our city attorney's office and our public works department. And then most recently, that particular project was blocked with a blocking petition. So it appears that what the intent is to roll that particular project over into next year. I think the intent of this project was to have the opportunity to do one sidewalk project a year, and we had a sort of an administrative issue this year that might have been a culprit in not getting one of those done. So I would like to have that one also as a circle back to discuss what our what the council's strategy is going forward for that particular item.
Just to ask a clarifying question, is the question, what are we budgeting for in 2014? Because I believe there were a number of other projects behind Howard. And so I believe this is budgeted for the next project in line and where we would start the process for that. Does that answer your question, or would you still like to come back to that?
So you're saying that, well, what is budgeted in 2014 now, specifically?
75,000 for which project is that, Steve or Corey?
Well, yeah. Oh, that was for Howard? Okay, that was for Howard.
Okay, which one's next?
Well, then we had Crockett from Garden to West and Comstock from Garden to West.
So my understanding with Howard being blocked, that they cannot pursue that for another 2 years, correct? So we would move on to, which one? Crockett?
Crockett and Comstock.
And so the 75,000 is budgeted for Crockett, correct? Each 175, okay. So we'll carry this money over in hopes to get to Crockett in 2015.
Which street is budgeted then after Howard? Crockett?
The next one on the list is actually Comstock.
Mm-hmm.
That petition was received about a week before Crockett. So there's two remaining items that were grandfathered into the old sidewalk policy. So that is Comstock on the north side between Garden and West. And the engineer's estimate is $175,000 to do that construction. The next project would be Crockett on the south side from Garden to West at $175,000 as well. And there is one more that was received after the policy was changed, which is Crestview on the south side between Kenilworth and Van Auken.
Okay.
Well, it looks like we need to adjust the budget to more accurately reflect what Mr. Berry, numbers that she's giving us.
If we could, then we'd like to put together a table to illustrate the future requests and make it a circle back item then? Is that okay?
Yeah, that would be great, thanks.
Alderman Gutenkopf.
I think the city manager's addressed my question.
I figured. I think we were all headed that way. Additional questions or comments? Alderman Kennedy.
Very quickly, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Page 151, under electrical, 3098, other services, a charge for $25,000. If you just, since it doesn't look like we have a history in there, if you just outline what that is.
I'm sorry, which line item again?
3098, under contractual services.
On page 151.
Yes, thank you.
Services.
Right, it's under their service.
Oh, okay.
25,000.
It's the engineering expenses for the streetlight wiring and luminaire study.
Okay. Let me make sure we have that. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Morley told us that that's on page 36 of the CAB if you want more detail.
Thank you. Other Morley.
Mr. Morley,
That other
not
Morley.
this Morley.
The
Thanks,
other
Uncle
Mr.
Pat.
Morley.
Any additional questions or comments as it relates to Public Works? Very good. Mr. Weinstock, thanks for getting up to speed so quickly. Thanks for your hard work, and also thanks to the rest of the staff, Mr. Morley and Corey. Thank you very much. Ms. DeBerry, sorry. Gary. Oh, I don't see Gary. Where's Gary? Hi, Gary. Thank you, Gary. On to budget topic I, according to our review schedule. Yes, Mr. Grabowski, Police Department?
Yes, correct.
Great.
I would ask Chief Ruth to join me at the table.
Welcome, Chief Ruth.
Thank you. Good evening. The primary mission of the Elmhurst Police Department is to provide effective and efficient delivery of law enforcement service to our community. The Police Department achieves this mission by our basic motto, which is providing the best. The mission and the motto are the guiding principles in the delivery of service that we have to the community. Some statistical background in terms of where we're at today. Calls for service from January to August 2013 were at 15,353, which is pretty consistent with previous years in terms of year to date. I'd like to go back a little bit, tell you where we started at the beginning of the year, where we're at today, and where we'd like to go, and then kind of highlight some areas of the budget. One of the goals that I had in beginning this calendar year was to be more strategic in terms of how we handled crime and calls for service, to try to utilize some of the software programs and the technology that are out there so that we could work much more efficiently and more effectively and try to anticipate emerging and identify emerging crime trends as they occurred. The second part was a community-based policing initiative by getting more officers in a visible position on the street and within the community. Increased visibility, utilizing more marked squad cars, having the squad cars interact with the community, getting out of the squads, focusing in the residential areas as well as the business areas and the parks within our community. We also moved that forward by utilizing more uniformed marked patrol cars and relying less on some of the unmarked patrol cars to create that visible presence within the community. We increased residential foot patrols, where we got officers to get out of the squad car and walk through some of the residential neighborhoods to interact and engage with the community, as well as engaging with our youth in the neighborhoods as well as in the parks as well. Then we'll also increase presence in the business district. And the other part was community presentations, to take a more active role in trying to identify and prevent crime by meeting with the community, giving talks and presentations, and better informing and educating them in the hopes to elicit their participation, encouraging them to call the police, and ultimately reducing crime. That was kind of the goals in which direction that we're heading in. I'll give you some year-to-date statistics, some analysis. Of course, it's year-to-date. The end of the year is not here, but robbery in the city is down 83%. Year-to-date burglaries, residential burglaries, are down 61% year-to-date. Motor vehicle theft, I almost need my glasses, is down 9% year-to-date. Criminal damage to property is down 10% year-to-date. Sex offenses are down 20% year-to-date. We've seen some increases in areas such as drug and narcotics offenses, which are up 15%. Our theft and white-collar crime, identity theft, financial fraud, credit card fraud, things of that nature, is up fairly significantly, about 42%. And domestic battery and domestic violence is up about 80% year-to-date. So that kind of gives you an idea in terms that where we're at year-to-date, and again, as the numbers, as the year continues, those numbers can change. But it gives us an idea in terms of where we're at, what issues we've targeted, and the impact that we've been able to have. 2014, as we position ourselves, is going to continue to engage community policing principles and concepts within the city. Again, continuing to increase visible patrols. We're going to expand our Speakers Bureau to get more of our officers out speaking with the public and engaging the community. Giving business presentations on topics such as theft prevention, domestic violence prevention, personal safety, things of that nature. The police department has a Facebook account which has kind of gone off to the wayside, so we're looking at re-engaging that for the calendar year, to engage that along with the Twitter account to get information in a timely fashion out to the community. and to be as transparent as we possibly can. The other aspect and the other third part is the schools, and to solidify our partnership and our relationship with the schools. The youth are, they have more things that they're exposed to today than ever before with some of the online issues and with the drug offenses which are out there, and that's all around us. So we need to partner up with them, find common ground, and then solidify and move that forward. So we're looking at doing that along with working closer with the schools and hopefully the library. In terms of the budget, there are a couple of things I did want to bring to your attention at first with a brief explanation, and then open it up to any questions that you may have. One of the areas that we've increased in is part-time. Is going to be part-time wages, part-time salary, and that's due to several different things. Number one is in last budgetary year we moved one full-time records position into two half-time or part-time positions. So we see an increase in that area. The other is we are staying static on our 27 school crossing guards, which are out and within our community. And the third part is that we're looking to increase the hours of our part-time police officers and get more police officers on the street. We've seen an increase with special events. In 2011, we had 8 special events. 2013, we've had 13. We expect that trend to continue, which is a good thing, but it requires police officers to be there providing event security in some cases. A lot of times it's traffic control, things of that nature. And we're also seeing an increase in 2013 for special details, which are worked by our police officers. And then it's reimbursed to the city's general fund, so it goes out in one area and comes back in a different. And for example, Mariano's needed some traffic control on York, so we put officers out there, but then billed them for that, so it came into a different account. There was a commercial, they filmed a Ford commercial in town, they filmed a Quizno commercial, Queso, yeah, okay. And then another commercial filming at DePaul, and a few other events. So the good news is we expect to see that involvement within the community continue, and as a result, we've increased the hours for our part-time personnel. One of the other areas that you'll see a significant increase in is 5001, and that deals with buildings. We're due for some scheduled updates with our building. The building is 22 years old. We've got a leaky gutter system. Last year we were under the impression that we could just replace the gutters, but they're not the standard aluminum gutters that you would have on your house. They're specially designed. They're a gutter within a gutter. It becomes a very expensive endeavor. There's also several upgrades to the heating and air conditioning system, which are going to be required. It's a special system, specially designed for the building. So, as a preventative maintenance measure, it's on a schedule. We expect to have a heating and air conditioning compressor rebuilt, and a control upgrade to the heating and air conditioning. It's currently a pneumatic system. We'd be looking at changing that over. It's reached its life expectancy to an electronic system. And one of the other areas that you'll see a significant increase in is something called forfeiture expenses. It's under 6027 and 6075, which is DUI tech expenditure. The forfeiture is monies which are recovered as a result of illegal activities. We currently have one officer who's assigned to the DEA task force, and as a result of the narcotics and money laundering, which he has been involved in those investigations, our police department is entitled to a percentage of those fees as a recovery. It usually takes about 2 to 3 years, so we're now seeing the benefits of the officer assigned to the DEA task force, and those funds are coming in. Those funds have to be used for law enforcement purpose. They're very specific in how they can be utilized, and they have to be utilized within 3 years generally of the award. If not, then we would lose that. So what we've done is we've taken some items out of the general budget and placed them into asset forfeiture. What we've done is we're looking at purchasing 3 police vehicles out of asset forfeiture to weigh that out, and then some building improvements, and also some training and some other issues for the department. That kind of covers it up generally, if there's any questions.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions for Chief Ruth? Alderman Bram.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A few questions, actually, one of which on page 138, DUCOM. I've asked this question in the past. The DUCOM budget line item seems to continue to increase no matter how many additional communities within DuPage County participate. Where is Elmhurst? I believe, if my memory is anywhere in the ballpark, we needed to update our radios. Is that true for DUCOM, or was that already done?
Yes, that was done previously. That's not in the budget now. What DUCOM has done is passed on a projected 5% increase to us, what they expect the labor costs to be. And then there's an additional approximately 50,000 that they're projecting for a backup facility and location. Those costs are set by DUCOM, and really not much we can do about that. But let me just add that if you average it out, it's about anywhere between 10,610 to 10,922 per sworn officer, and that's pretty consistent with a consolidated dispatch. Before I came here, I did extensive research with Southwest Central, and Southwest Central Dispatch was charging at that time $10,580 per sworn. So as much as it's high, it's within the ballpark. If we were to do that on our own, we would have to pay for all the equipment, the maintenance, and everything, and this cost would be perhaps 3 times as much.
If I can add to that, Chief Bassiter had said before about the second DUCOM facility that we're keeping a close eye on. I can't say at the meetings I've been to at DUCOM that everyone is in favor of it. There are some of us who want them to look a little deeper into it, and that's why the possibility of College of DuPage came up as the possible second location. They were pretty well set to go out and lease a facility, and we kind of slowed that process down and had them look at some other alternatives. But with the growth here, you're right that you would think logically adding more departments would bring that cost down. However, there's a certain number of dispatchers that they need, so what it does is lessen the increase to all the agencies.
Thank you. And Chief Ruth, I do appreciate that comparison. The 10,000 number, I don't believe, my recollection, I've heard that before. So that's something that at least puts it in perspective per sworn officer. The other thing is, I do apologize. I was indisposed. I had to step away when the conversation about the second facility was mentioned during the fire discussion. A little levity, a little joke here, but on page 139, feeding prisoners, are we going to stakes for prisoners here? Because it goes from $70 to $300 from real costs to act or budgeted. A little bit of jest there. I know we're not. It just doesn't seem like we ever get close to the budgeted line item of $300. But just more levity. You don't even have to respond to that comment. But in regards to, and I should have mentioned this on other departments as well. I actually would hope that we're feeding them steaks and not cheeseburgers, so I hope we don't have that much crime that we have that many more prisoners here. But vehicles, I noticed when I look at the vehicle replacement schedule that some of the police cars are every 3rd, 4th year replacement, some are longer than that. Have we taken a deeper dive for vehicle replacement within the police department? Is there any consolidation that could happen? As an example, I look at page of the capital expenditures budget on page 87. I look at PD 34 and PD 35, both hybrid escapes. I assume that's not for the actual patrol officers. I'm assuming that's for the parking enforcement. Do we have two individuals doing parking enforcement at the same time? Is there any consolidation? We do, I see nods up and down. We do have two going on at once.
Yes.
Okay. The only other question on the vehicle replacement is the speed monitor on page of the capital expenditures budget on page 88. I don't know if this is a replacement or in addition to. Is the speed monitor referred to commonly in City Hall, the speed trailer that is the big trailer that we set out on streets to remind people to go to speed limit? And is this in addition to, or is this a replacement of?
We've got that scheduled for a replacement. So far it's been holding up, and if we can push it on another year, it's our intent to do so. But if the maintenance costs begin to rise in the spring, then we'll have to take a close look. But it's going to be a replacement, not to expand it.
Just out of curiosity, what is the current issue? I would think it would be a relatively basic device which would have pretty longevity. What is the current issues with the current speed trailer?
Sometimes it doesn't work. It just shuts down.
Thank you for the deep technical analysis.
It's 12 years old. I mean, it's a radar device, so it's getting exposure to the cold, and because of the electronics, it has to be exact. And if it's not, if there's a variance or a deviance from that, it's not accurate. So,
have we? And I didn't see it in here, and that's why I'm asking. We also have the small signs that are post signs for radaring traffic going by to once again remind those individuals that they're residential streets and should be following the posted speed limit. Have we thought about increasing the number of those signs that could be posted on a post?
By doing that, I think we just got 2 or 3, definitely 2, possibly 3, from some grant money. Placing them on a post, although that type of sign may be cheaper, there's much more labor costs involved, and having Public Works have to go out and install it on a pole, and all of those things associated with it. So, we're just kind of going where we're at with we're not expanding it for this year. Is my answer.
Thank you.
Alderman Healy. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chief, I get a lot of positive compliments from the residents about the foot patrols. I think every time police presence is ramped up around a school, I get emails and calls thanking the city. So I think that's great. Question I have, though, a little more in depth on the foot patrols, police presence around schools. Accepting the resource officers, which of course are going to be in the schools, do we have our officers going into the schools, middle schools, high schools, just as a routine, a patrol routine, just to be a visible uniform presence during school hours, after school hours? Are we doing anything along those lines?
Yes, we are. The officers that are assigned to those particular areas, if call dependent, of course, if they're not tied up on a call, they're to be in the vicinity, and then throughout the day, if they can stop in and just say hello. So the school personnel gets to know who that officer is who's assigned to that particular area. The other side of that is parents get very excited when they see the marked squad car in front and an officer walking down the hall. So there's a delicate balance that we have with that, but yes, they are out there, and yes,
those are unannounced visits, correct?
Correct.
And what, if I may ask, what kind of reception has the police department got over those visits? You mentioned that the parents get a little skittish. Are you hearing more positive, more negative? What feedback are you getting?
It's kind of calmed down a little bit, but at first, yes, it was what's going on, what's the problem, should there be, do we really need to have a policeman walking through my school? And of course, those are the few and far between, but for the most part, they seem to be welcoming it. I mean, I can appreciate the fact that our officers are having a dialogue with the parents and with the students and the kids and the faculty and the administrators, and they're able to bring back issues and concerns much more readily than they would be to pick up the phone and give us a call. So I enjoy that line of communication, and the officers, believe it or not, have embraced it as well, and I'm pleased to say that.
Well, just one alderman's opinion who's got a child at one middle school and a high school, you can't do it enough. Thank you.
Alderman Deuter?
Thank you, Mayor. I just had a question on page 61 in the narrative that outlines some of the expectations for 2014. One of the bullets there says, work with city attorneys to tackle the problems with synthetic drugs and pass an associated city ordinance. Can you just describe what the issue is and what might be in that type of ordinance?
There have been some items that our youth have been able to purchase over the counter at local 7-Elevens and whatnot, and there has been concern that they're starting to ingest them. The synthetic cannabis that kind of has been addressed and approached, but there's some other things out there now that the kids are picking up off of the internet, and we're still learning about some of the compounds which are out there, and the compounds by themselves aren't necessarily bad, but when they're mixed with something else, it's just not a good mix for us. So we need to take a look and see if there's something that we can do on a local ordinance level that would put combining those compounds together and give us some teeth in terms of enforcement.
Alderman Levin.
Two programmatic questions. One is, do we use any in-car video for traffic stops? Is that installed in our cars?
Yes, all the marked squad cars have a video camera installed in them. Those cameras were purchased, and they are maintained under the Asset Forfeiture Fund, under the DUI Tech Fund. So yes, all the traffic stops are recorded, and there's a 15-second pre-record. So if something were to happen and we turn the lights on, or if there's a collision or something like that, as soon as we hit the lights, we captured the 15 to 30 seconds before the activation of the camera.
All right. The other question I wanted to ask is, there's been a lot of news about increased heroin. I know there was a program in which unfortunately I couldn't attend, but I got some feedback on that. Are there any different enforcement efforts or problems that we're seeing in our community in that regard?
We're seeing an increased, we're seeing an increased use in heroin by some of our young people. I think it's a two-tiered approach. Number one is the enforcement end, and number two is the public education end. Just today, I had a discussion with one of the officers who's going into the plainclothes unit, and we're going to sit down and map out a plan to put together some presentations to the local PTA to better inform some of the parents in terms of what to look for, what are some of the high-risk things that you're going to see. There's a and this is a budget thing, and I don't want to get too far off track, but there's a strong correlation between prescription drugs and addiction to heroin, and that a lot of drugs are innocently prescribed for a legitimate medical purpose, and what happens is an addiction occurs with the hydrocodone, the Vicodin, the other compounds of that nature, and they become harder to get, and it becomes easier to get heroin. So we're aware of that, and we're trying to do something to move it forward so we can better educate the public.
I think that's a good program because, when we're out in the community, we hear people who hear that on the news, and then others say, well, there's no problem here in Elmhurst, and the question, is there? And if there is, I think it would be a good project for our police department to let the parents in particular know what it is and what to look for, and be aware of a problem that some think does not exist in this community.
Yes.
But thank you.
Thank you.
And I think you're on your finishing your first year here.
Yes, November 5th will be my first year.
Congratulations. Good job.
Thank you.
Any additional questions or comments for Chief Ruth? Alderman Bram.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Back on page 139, just a question on some of the programs we've had in the past, and I'm seeing some blanks for this upcoming budget year, 2014. For instance, K-9 program, I don't see any monies allocated to it. but I continue to see monies allocated for animal control, which animal control I thought we are no longer doing within the city of Elmhurst. So if you can clarify that along with any other programs, which I think those were the two here that I saw. Oh, DARE, another one. Are those grouped under a different, or are we heading down a different path?
Well, we are committed to continue the DARE program, and again, that's one of the components of our community-based policing initiative. Instead of putting that in the general fund, I've identified those particular expenditures that come out of asset forfeiture. So it's going to help us out, I think, in the long term, and as far as the city goes. Animal control, although we don't have animal control, we still take animals, and sometimes they're deceased animals or things of that nature. So there's or somebody drops off a stray at the police department, we're still obligated to pay the expenses associated with that.
Thank you.
Alderman Gutenkauf.
It's just sort of a procedural question. Even though you're taking those budget lines from asset forfeiture, don't they still have to show up as expenses in the budget? Doesn't asset forfeiture come in as the income, and then they have to show up as expenses in this line? So if they don't show up as an expense, how do you spend it?
What the police department did, on the forfeiture expenses line, 6027, it was increased to 231,000. It's in that number.
So instead of showing separately?
It's actually in there as an expense. You'll still see on the revenue side, revenues coming in for DARE and, some of those individual revenue lines. But for purposes here, since it's forfeiture monies that are paying for it, at least in the short term for the next 3 years while we have these dollars coming in, it takes them, as Chief Ruth said, off the tax rolls, so to speak, and the asset forfeiture monies are being used to pay for those expenses.
Can I have a follow-up? I'm sorry, so is there a practical reason for not leaving them in as individual lines? They wouldn't be taxpayer money because they're being paid for by the income from the forfeiture. So is there a practical reason for not showing them individually as expenses? If we want to add them back in, if that forfeiture line drops, then we've got to go back through the process of creating a space for them?
I understand what you're saying, Alderman. Sometimes from an accounting standpoint, when we have a designated revenue, particularly here when we have to show and prove that we have used expenses, used money in a certain way, it's better that I can go to one account and have all of these expenses in one place. They're already all captured, and we can prove very easily that we've used the resource in the way that we should.
So it's just an accounting procedure for the grant,
right?
As a way
it's
to
more,
report back.
and it's more from an accounting standpoint.
Okay, any additional questions or comments? Alderman Dunn.
My question revolves around the overtime budget line item. That comes in at about 13% of the salary line item, which seemed to be consistent year after year. Is that the level that you think is we need to be at, and why would that be?
Page 138. Overtime. 1003.
1003.
I'm sorry, I was talking to Marilyn as you were asking your question, Alderman Dunn. Would you repeat that, please?
Yeah, the overtime line item on page 138 is close to $1 million. Runs about 13% of the salary line item. Although it doesn't seem to be excessive, it is significant. And I'm wondering what the staffing strategy is that makes that the right number for the Elmhurst Police Department.
a lot of times it's based on historical trends, late calls that come in, some emergency crisis, a flooding issue, a major accident, a major investigation where it requires additional manpower and staffing. We run into that. Sometimes when employees call in sick, we fall below minimum staffing levels, so we're forced to hire back for overtime for that to be able to keep our staffing levels to adequately protect the city. It generally tends to be that 13%. So.
Based on that. Okay.
Additional questions or comments?
If I could just add to that, I think using, as Chief Ruth detailed earlier, using the part-time police officers into the future will help keep that lower. That's one of the reasons that we're using part-time officers versus full-time officers.
I thought the part-time would also help the salary line item, but the salary went up with the normal increment, as did the part-time, as did the overtime. So that's why I asked. Thanks.
Okay. Seeing no additional questions for Chief Ruth, I'll do a time check. City Manager Grabowski, we've got about 5 minutes before we hit our 10 o'clock target. You want to try to knock off one of these real quick, or do you want to just hold them over?
We'd like to start Municipal Utility Fund. Gary Smith is here tonight, and just in an effort to get him through the budget, we'd ask the indulgence of the council to go through that.
Okay, so we'll target one more. We okay with that? Got you. One more line item, City Manager Grabowski.
220.
Okay, the Municipal Utility Fund, Jim, is that what we're talking about here?
Yes, that's
okay.
The Municipal Utility Fund operates and maintains water and wastewater programs through 2 divisions within the Department of Public Works. Responsible for a 20 million gallon per day activated sludge wastewater treatment plant and 10 sanitary sewer lift stations. The water system can produce up to 15 million gallons a day with 3 large finished water reservoirs and 3 elevated storage tanks. And they're also responsible for the 12 stormwater pump stations and 4 stormwater reservoirs. Significant accomplishments for 2013. Construction of the anaerobic digester number 3 was completed. There's a lot of improvements at the wastewater treatment plant. Construction began on a new dry sludge storage building. Final design and phase 1 construction began on the Southwest Elmhurst wet weather control facility. We've talked about this quite a bit this year, the upgrades to the Saylor and Jackson sanitary lift station and construction of a 2 million gallon reservoir and associated force mains. That construction was begun and the engineering is continuing on that. Design was completed for replacement of the lift station at Route 83 and 3rd Street. We began working on a wireless mesh communication network. Phase 1 of the project should be completed in 2013, and a software upgrade and the separation of the water and wastewater systems within our SCADA system is also planned. The installation of a new dual-fired gas generator at the treatment plant was also performed. This generator runs both on natural gas and the biogas that's given off by the treatment process. This allows the city to save substantially on fuel purchases at the treatment plant and was purchased through a $200,000 grant. Final design will be completed on the Park Street sanitary sewer lift station this year, as will the final installation of the main digester boiler at the treatment plant. Computer modeling of the water distribution system is scheduled for completion this year. Also, the emergency rebuild of the chlorine contact tank number 2 will be completed as the main drive unit is beyond repair. The Salt Creek Pump Station water quality and landscape enhancements projects, those goals are to manage sedimentation and siltation, aid in mineral and nutrient mitigation, and aid in stormwater detention and promote indigenous plant growth and model sustainable practices in the community. And this project will be completed at several of the lift stations along Salt Creek. In 2014, we're planning to continue to work with consultants and contractors on several projects. Southwest Elmhurst Wet Weather Control Facility will continue, the Route 83 and 3rd Street lift station, the effluence sampling station for the treatment plant, the water production reservoir chlorine room ventilation upgrades, and the dry sludge storage building. Other items include the emergency generator at Lake and Walnut Sanitary Lift Station, replacing the digesters waste gas burner at the treatment plant, fixing the clarifier at the treatment plant, and working on the high-speed communications between the sanitary lift stations and the treatment plant, and its integration with the SCADA system. Regarding the distribution and collection divisions, they manage 170 miles of water main, 160 miles of sanitary sewers, and which includes, and the storm sewer system, which includes more than 60 outfalls and flap gates discharging into the Salt Creek and other local streams. They maintain 15,000 residential and commercial water meters, and they respond to over 10,000 service calls each year. Significant accomplishments in the collection and distribution division included 25,000 feet of sanitary sewer being lined with cured-in-place pipe, the annual fire hydrant flushing program and leak survey to help improve the amount of unaccounted-for water, and implementation of a fats, oils, and grease program to help protect the sanitary sewer system. Sewer maintenance also includes 85,000 feet of sanitary sewer line inspection and cleaning, and 16-point repairs were made to that. 20 cubic yards of debris were removed from the storm sewer system. 2013, they developed a water main replacement project using a database of over 30 years of water main break information, and developed a sanitary sewer problem area database which directs sewer crews to areas of concern where sewer backups have occurred, and regular maintenance then would reduce customer complaints and improve system performance in that location. And then there's testing of compound water meters for accuracy, again as part of the attempt to reduce unaccounted-for water. For 2014, all of those ongoing maintenance programs would be continued, and they'd be looking at lining and of 20,000 feet of sanitary sewer line again, which helps reduce the I&I into the system and improves reliability. With that, ready for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Weinstock. Excuse me. Any questions? Alderman Healy.
Thank you, Mr. Morley. Question on revenue. I've talked to Director Gaston about the revenue side previously, and it's my understanding that we are considering changing, or at least sometime the Finance Committee is going to be taking up changing how we charge for water and sewer. How were the revenue projections for this budget calculated? Were they calculated based on our current rate system, or are you anticipating some sort of change?
They were projected using the current system. We are in the middle of the water and rate study that we talked about, but we have no recommendations coming back from that yet, so the budget is based on what we have done in the past. Should a new water rate, sewer rate system come into effect based on this water and sewer study, we would be making those changes, but this budget that study will not be complete in time to impact this budget for this coming up year. But that doesn't mean that we can't put something new in place.
And So is the finance committee going to be looking at that in the next couple months, or are we going to let this study happen? What's the timing on?
The timing is, yes, in the next couple of months. Our goal was to have it done, vetted, in front of the council, so if we needed to make a change, it would be set by January 1st. That's not going to happen, but it is ongoing. It will be hopefully in the first month or two of the new year. So.
Thank you.
Alderman Braham?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. More of a general comment, but it's targeted against page 203. And it's really a general comment of revenue versus expenditures. This year, we seem to have significant planned capital improvements, and therefore our expenditures are significantly greater than previous years, more than double in some cases. What is the city's philosophy in regards to the revenue source that we do get from the MUF versus the expenditures that we need to do for all of the city infrastructure? Because in this case, we would be going into pretty much a 15 million, I don't want to use the word deficit, but a $15 million expenditures more than our revenue source. So do we try to keep it at a certain percentage, revenue versus expenditures, in a normal planned year, or it's just whatever we can squeeze out of it?
There isn't a norm. Right now, we are in a several-year cycle, and Gary can correct me on this, where we are in not just flood mitigation projects, but replacement projects, because portions of our infrastructure, particularly the treatment plant, are old. They must be replaced. And that's what a lot of this capital is replacement of infrastructure that is the timing it is needed. The source to pay for this will be primarily low-interest IEPA loans or general obligation bonds that will then have the water and sewer rate fees coming in to pay for those bonds. But that you see on the capital line, almost $14 million, that's going to be paid for with the IEPA loans and the GO bonds. Is the wet weather facility. And of that 14 million, about 9 million is the Southwest wet weather control facility.
Okay, and the other question I have is, it's actually all throughout the document, but on page 213, water production, it's a discussion we've had in the past in regards to Chicago increasing their rates, therefore DuPage Water Commission increasing their rates, and we getting essentially stuck with the bill. Under contractual services, 30-20 is the DuPage Water Commission consumption, and from the 12-13 budget line item, which was 4.3 million approximately, going 2 years later, but going up to 5.9, almost 6 million. Is that because increased charges, an assumption of increased consumption, a mixture of both? And what are we doing with, and maybe this part is the city manager question, but what are we doing to try to hold the increase from the production from DuPage Water Commission and therefore City of Chicago, so we don't see these large jumps like we did in the past couple of years?
There was a 5-year program where Chicago was passing along increases, 20 to 25% increases to DuPage Water Commission. They adopted a plan, a 4-year plan of those increases then going to their customers. So we knew, in their built in here in the 2014 is an 18% increase and another 18% increase last year. That follows a couple of years of 20% increases, January 1st of each of those years. So the dollars here, we look at an average consumption over the last 5 to 10 years, because if it's a drought year, people use more water. If it's a nice rainy summer, you're not going to have people using as much water, so we try and average that out. So that's not what's fluctuating. The increases are almost 100% what's coming through from DuPage Water Commission.
And thus, thank you to City of Chicago.
Exactly, and I'm not sure, I can certainly,
If you recall, 2 years ago, when this occurred, there was significant pushback, not only by the DuPage Water Commission and all the communities in DuPage County, but other significant water customers of the city of Chicago. The Finance Committee looked at this at the time and sort of smoothed out the increase so it wasn't as large percentage-wise as what was being passed on to us. What we received a commitment from, and I say we, the DuPage Water Commission, we received a commitment from the city of Chicago to demonstrate to us how they're spending the dollars that they increased it. And I want to say it's semi-annual reports that the city of Chicago is sending to the DuPage Water Commission, showing, again, the improvements to the system that benefit us, not just improvements to help their customers, being individual residents.
And the city of Elmhurst, as well as DuPage County, has reviewed those, and they seem to be appropriate, as much as I could say appropriate.
I would tell you that the first round of reports that they sent to us, the DuPage Water Commission sent back and said that wasn't our agreement. You need to show more detail. And so the city of Chicago did give us more detail, to the point where you can push the city of Chicago as the producer and shipper of the commodity that we're purchasing from them.
Thank you.
Additional questions? Okay, I think that wraps it up for that line item. I think we're at 10:10, Mr. Grabowski. I think we're going to call it an evening.
Yes, just one additional item. I did want to introduce or make known two other staff members who are here this evening, Dan Rosenwinkel and Chris Dufert in the audience. I appreciate them being here as well. They're with Gary's group.
Thank you very much. Motion to adjourn. Alderman Dunn, second by Alderman Deuter. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned.